morning, and we're going to talk about guaranteed lifetime income benefits. And we're going to look at a number of things this morning about this, but first thing is we're going to understand how they work and why we use them. And then we're going to look at the three different types of designs that are out there. And this is really, really important, these different designs, because as we'll see, the difference in them drives how much income is actually going to be guaranteed, one versus another. So let's go ahead and pop into this thing. So let's first start about the basic issue of this. And this is an issue that's dear to my heart. I believe a lot in these things. As part of my strange and varied background, I actually was on the launch team for the very first GLIB that was put onto a fixed indexed annuity. As background to that, prior to these being put on fixed indexed annuities, which happened starting around, I want to say it was, I can't even remember, I think it was around 2004, 2005. Prior to that, they were initially developed and were available on variable annuities for years before they were ever attached to fixed products. And to tell you the truth, Vitaly, a lot of the income planning stuff that I've developed over the years that really rely on these GLIBs, we actually started doing using VAs. I mean, this is way back in the day, okay, because that was the only place you could get them. And the first company to put a GLIB onto a fixed product was Forethought. It's how they entered the market, and that's how I ended up doing years of consulting for Forethought. So anyway, the thing about a GLIB and the core value proposition of a GLIB is it is a means of providing lifetime income to a client while the client retains account value control. And this was fairly radical in the annuity in the advent of a GLIB, especially on fixed products. The only way a client could get income guaranteed for life was money. And annuitizing money, of course, means that you're giving up control of it. So that's the big thing about these deals. So let's take a look at this. The first thing we always want to answer, anytime that we're talking about an additional rider or an additional benefit, particularly one that generally comes with a fee on an annuity or really any type of product, is we first have to understand why would a client need or want this. So if we take our typical deferred annuity, okay, that could be any type of deferred annuity. It could be a rate guaranteed MYGA, it could be a traditional design, or it could be a fixed indexed annuity. The first thing we've got to understand is that a deferred annuity, without adding a rider to it, like a GLIB, already has some built-in income benefits. They're what could be called an income benefit. They're standard equipment, so to speak. Those two income benefits to any deferred annuity that's really ever been created are penalty withdrawals or the ability to annuitize that money for income. In fact, deferred annuity, which is what most of we sell, the term deferred actually means that annuitization is being deferred until a later time. That's how we contrast them from what we call immediate annuities or SPIAs. A lot of people mistakenly think that the technical term deferred annuity actually means tax deferral. It doesn't have anything to do with that at all. It simply means that the annuitization is being deferred until a later time. So, penalty-free withdrawals. Now, why might a client want to use a GLIB for income instead of making penalty-free withdrawals? Well, the answer, that's pretty obvious. Their principal plus any interest earnings may not last for their lifetime. Well, the answer to that in a standard deferred annuity was always, well, yeah, but we can annuitize it, okay? Now, that'll give lifetime income because you can annuitize any annuity on a life or a life, various life options, but the client loses account value control because there is no account value with an annuitized, they get the income, but they don't have an account value. So the guaranteed lifetime income benefit bridges this by providing a guaranteed lifetime income, but still retaining an account value that the client is in control of. And that is the key issue around these types of benefits. Now, when we put a GLIB rider, and with a lot of products, even though it's technically a rider, it's just automatically on there, but we'll call it a rider. We're going to track two separate values. So these two values are called the account value and the income base. Remember that depending on the carrier, some carriers use a slightly different term for this income base, but it's all, really means the same thing. The first thing that we have to understand as professionals, as well as our clients have to understand, is that an account value and an income base are apples and oranges, completely different things, okay? Simplest way to think about this is the account value is the cash plus any withdrawal charges or early surrender charges, but it's the actual cash money sitting inside the deferred annuities account value, also sometimes referred to as the annuity value. So it's money. Now the income base is a totally different thing whose only function in life is to determine the ultimate amount of lifetime income will be at some point in the future. In most products, that income base also determines the dollar amount of the annual fee. So the account value math formula, okay, it's just a math. Now, when we do this and we put money in one of these things and we have this GLIB attached to this annuity, both values are going to grow prior to the start of beginning the lifetime income benefit. Now, the account value is going to grow based upon credited interest, whatever that might be. Most commonly right now, that's indexed interest, but it could be declared rate interest, such as a traditional annuity. It could be guaranteed interest if this was attached to a MYGA type thing. Probably 98% of these products that are available right now are attached to fixed indexed annuities. We're going to see that change dramatically in 2017 when the DOL rules kick in, because carriers are now going to increasingly attach these riders to traditional declared rate or declared interest annuities. AEL is already working on those designs, and I think several other ones are as well. So the point is that account value functions like it would if there was no GLIB rider attached to it, okay? It's going to grow based upon an indexed interest strategy that we now understand, or however interest is being credited this thing. So the easiest, there's no GLIB attached to the annuity. The account value functions the same whether there's one there or there isn't one there, okay? Now, this income base is the core of the GLIB. It's typically going to grow at a specific guaranteed rate, and it may or may not include what they call an income bonus, okay? And that rate that it's going to grow at is either going to be some percentage guaranteed. It's either going to be a simple interest guarantee or a compounded guarantee. And that growth may be for a specific number of years, for example, only for 10 years. Okay, other ones will grow for longer. Okay, and once that income benefit or that income stream is actually started, the growth of that income base in most products will stop. Okay, you guys with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. That growth of that income base is what we refer to internally in the industry as the roll-up rate. You never really see the term roll-up rate, at least rarely, I would say, in any marketing materials. That's what we call it. We call it the roll-up. At what rate does this income base roll up? What we've seen developed on the market, okay, is that some of these GLIBs grow at a multiple of account value interest credit, what we call performance-based. In other words, rather than saying we'll guarantee, I don't know, 10% growth of that income base, we're simply going to say that we'll make that a multiple of whatever interest is credited to the account value. So, if the account value, we'll credit 150% of the account value interest. So, if the account value grew at 10, then the income base would grow at 15. Okay. Now, this may result in potentially higher lifetime income, but the actual strength of the guarantee is much less than those that use a guaranteed rate of growth. Now, why is that? Okay, or what we call performance-based growth of these income bases. Because if the account index interest crediting, in other words, the index doesn't perform or the index strategy doesn't perform, then that income base isn't going to grow. Okay, so we'll talk about later the pros and cons of each of these, fully guaranteed versus performance-based, but increasingly we're seeing these types of income riders come out. The Allianz 222 product is a great example of that. Okay, that's a purely performance-based income benefit. So we'll get into that later. We're going to look at examples of all of these in a few minutes. Now, regardless of whether or not that income-based growth is fully guaranteed or is based upon some type of index performance, here's the key thing. The income-based growth is not a guarantee of interest credited to the account value. It's only a math formula. Now, this is really critically important because it is this very issue that has led, from the very day these damn things were brought out, okay, agents out there, or at least less scrupulous agents, have sold these annuities based upon the guaranteed growth of that interest to the income base. And that's not really what's happening, and you'll see ads to this day on it. In fact, that whole damn Brokers Alliance annuity lead generation program is based upon a lie, and it's this. They put out these ads and say guaranteed 8% annuity returns. Well, that's not really what's happening. You may have a guaranteed growth of that income base, but that's just a math formula. It's not guaranteed growth to that account value. So it's really, really misleading to do that, okay? Because this income-based growth is simply a math formula. It's not real money. It's a phantom calculation that's going on, as we're going to see. Now, once that GLIB is started, or I like to use the term triggered, then what's going to happen? Income is going to be determined by whichever one of these two things. The income base of the account value has grown the most in the years since we've waited for the income to begin, and by an age-based factor, what we generally refer to as an income factor. Okay. Now, in almost every case, the income base is going to produce the higher value. So generally speaking, that's really what we're looking at. Okay. Can the account value increase more than the income base? It's theoretically possible. It's never happened in history. So once we determine what the annual income guarantee is going to be, and that's determined using that income base and the age-based factor and all of that, once the income begins, those annual income withdrawals are deducted from that account value side. In other words, this income base has pretty much served its purpose. When we make those withdrawals, the account value continues to grow net of those withdrawals. Okay, so for example, if we have, I don't know, $100,000 in the account value, and every year our income benefit is $1,000, so every year $1,000 is deducted from that account value, and the remaining $99,000 in this example would continue to grow with whatever interest was credited to that account value based upon whatever strategy they're using. Okay, so this income base typically stops growing and will decline. Okay, here's the thing. Even though we've started this guaranteed lifetime income benefit, we're pulling this money out of the account value, and that account value is continuing to grow based upon whatever interest is being credited, the owner still can access and pull more money out of that account value. There's just a price for doing it, okay? Any money they take out of that account value in excess of that guaranteed lifetime income benefit amount is going to reduce their future guaranteed income. If they take too much out, it'll stop the guaranteed income entirely. So knowing this, we're able to tell the consumer that yes, you still have access to that account value above what this guaranteed money coming out is, but you have to think of that as purely emergency access, because if you pull more out, your future guaranteed income goes down. If you do too much of that, you could just basically wipe it out entirely. Nonetheless, let me go back, but nonetheless, this is a nice thing to the consumer. This guaranteed income stream, they've got this account, that account reducing every year as a result of these income payments, but they also know that if some catastrophe happens, if they really need to, they can still access more of that account value, even knowing it's going to reduce their future guaranteed income. You guys with me so far?
Yep,
Yes.
I am.
Okay. Now, here's the thing about the core benefit of these is that over time, if somebody lives long enough, okay, the income withdrawals, even though that account value is still getting interest crediting, is likely to deplete that account value, make it go to zero. And as long as they play by the rules of the contract, if that account value is depleted, the owner is still guaranteed that they'll get that amount of that GLIB withdrawal for their remaining lifetime. And I like to call that the secondary guarantee. And this is how we provide lifetime guaranteed income, account value control, and access. Now you might say, well, how much over time, or how old would somebody have to get in order to deplete that account value? Well, it's an actuarial function, okay? And if you look at illustrations of these things, okay, you'll tend to notice that unless somebody starts it when they're really old, okay, but if you start, say you purchase a product at, I don't know, at age 67 and you start the income at 70, I'm just doing this off the top of my head, and you're pulling this out, generally speaking, these things are kind of designed to where that account value is most likely to deplete right around the mid to late 80s, okay, which is normal mortality, all right? And this is really not an accident, because what effectively the insurance company is saying is that if you live beyond normal mortality, okay, then we can guarantee you always have this income. But effectively, if you die around normal mortality, the carrier is really not kicking in any of their money because there's still money in the account value. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Yeah, yes it does.
Okay. In other words, it's insurance. We're insuring their income. That's a really easy way to think about it. In fact, the CFP, who's a good friend of mine, and I actually officed with for a number of years, that's actually how he sells these things. He says, what we're doing here is we're going to, insure this income stream. That's effectively what we're doing, and it can be an effective way to put it to a client. Now, let's put math to this. Okay, so let's assume at age 55, okay, why am I going age 55? Because, well, the earlier you buy these things, the more income you're going to get out of them. Also because we're seeing that's almost getting close to the average age these things are being issued at right now, okay? 100 grand premium, we're going to assume a 3% premium bonus we issue at age 55. So what happens at contract issue? Well, the account value, the real money, if you will, is going to equal that premium plus bonus, right? So we put in 100 grand, we got a 3% bonus, we got $103,000 account value. This income base would start out as it may have a different, even larger bonus attached to it as part of its math formula. But to keep it simple, we're going to assume it's the same. Okay, so let's just assume they both start out with a 3% boost. Okay. Now, going forward, what's going to happen? Well, just as we discussed, this account value is going to grow based upon whatever kind of interest crediting. We'll just assume probably indexed interest. So let's assume that this particular design of the income base is going to grow at 10% annual simple interest. Now, this brings up the point. Are we very clear? And if you're not, tell me what the difference between simple and compound interest is. Are you guys clear on that?
Yes.
Lori?
I'm sorry.
Yes?
Repeat simple and compound. Repeat it to me again so I can make sure it's in my brain.
Yeah. Well, I'm asking, do you guys really fully understand the difference between those? If not, it's a real simple thing, and it's very important that you do. Okay, it's not if you don't, there's no shame, and I want to make sure that you do. Okay, compound interest versus simple interest.
No, I don't. So tell me so I can make
sure. It's really simple. Okay, on your notepad, Lori, or any scrap of paper, I want you to write down the figure 1,000. Okay. You got that?
I got it.
Now, let's say that $1,000 is going to grow at 10% simple interest every year, right? So what's 10% of 1,000? That's $100, right?
Right.
So what that means is every year they're going to add $100 to that growth, okay? That's simple interest, okay? Compound interest works differently. draw a line and put your $1,000 again on your pad and that compound interest. So in the first year, compound interest would be 10% of that 1,000, so it's still $100, right?
Right.
Now, what's 1,000 plus 100? It's 1,100 bucks, right?
Right.
Compound interest, if it was 10%, would now be 10% of that $1,100.
Right.
Okay, you with me? So that'd be what, 110 bucks or so, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Gets added to the account, okay? So now at the end of that year, we'd have 0, 1, 2, we'd have 1210. Okay, so I'm getting at the end of the second year. In other words, that's compound versus simple interest, okay?
Gotcha.
Now, when we look at the different designs that are out there, especially for these guaranteed roll-up rates, some are simple, some are compounded. Now, you might think, why would a carrier use simple instead of compounded? Okay. Well, the reason they do that is they can use a larger number. Okay. If I've got 10% simple growth on my money, that's probably the equivalent, without me doing the calculation, of maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7% compounded. Okay. So they use simple, not because it gives them any real mathematical advantage, because they could use a lower rate compounded, but 10% sounds better than 7. Okay, that's the only reason they go with simple. Okay, so let's just assume we're going to go with simple interest. Now, let's say we wait till 11 years in the contract. So we're at the end of the 11th contract year, right? Okay, so and our client now wants to begin its income. Let's just assume that that account value, based upon its interest strategy, grew to $144,651. I don't remember what rate I calculated that at. It's probably 4% or something. Okay. Well, this income base, based upon that 10% simple annual growth, will have grown to $208,000. Okay. So we're going to trigger our income. Our owner is 67. Let's assume that the income factor for age 67, single life, is for determining what his annual income is going to be is very simple. We simply do this. We take that $208,000 value of income base, okay, and we multiply that income base dollars by that factor. So in this case, 208,000 times 4.5% equals $9,360. That is now going to be the guaranteed lifetime annual income for this particular person, $9,360. You guys with me so far? It's very simple. Now remember that these income benefit factors are not the same for every carrier or even every product within a carrier's lineup, okay? Each product will have a different set of income benefit factors for a different set of ages. And most products, really all of them, will also allow a joint life factor as well. So there'll be a separate factor if it's joint lives. And if we're going to use joint lives, it's always based upon it's going to be a lower factor to create, lesser income, and it's always going to be based on the age of the youngest owner. Okay? But let's just go with what we got here. So after 11 years, we've determined that we're going to get $9,360 a year. Now the lifetime income withdrawals are going to commence. Well, that income base, you notice I turned it gray. It's pretty much, served its function there. There is a little more function to it, but we'll get to that in a moment. But now these annual income withdrawals are going to be deducted each year from that account value, okay? And that account value would continue to grow net of those withdrawals. So whatever we had there was 144,000 some odd. We're going to pull out 9360, and then whatever's remaining in there will get credited with interest next year. Okay, and this happens every single year. Account value access continues. So as long as they don't pull more than 900 and 360, or the amount of that withdrawal out of their account every year, then they're guaranteed that for life at that level. Okay, if in a given year they have to come in and they say, well, I need another $5,000, okay, then that is going to reduce the future guaranteed income. In most cases, it's going to do it proportionally. So for example, if they took an additional 5% of their account value over and above that, that GLID amount, then their future guaranteed income would be reduced typically by 5%. okay? But that can vary a little bit by carrier. So everybody with me?
Yep.
Okay. And as we mentioned before, if those withdrawals eventually deplete that account value, as long as they didn't take too much out and kill their value off, then even if their account goes to zero, they're still going to get that $9,360 a year for life. So that is how a GLIB works, to provide lifetime guaranteed income for still giving that account control and access. And this is why people like it. Now, if we took that same $100,000, or that same, let's just take that account value, same $144,000 and change at the time we started this thing, and we put it, say, into an immediate annuity, an annuitization, okay? The income they're going to get will be maybe a little bit higher, but they don't any longer have $144,000 because annuitization is a trade. They trade it away to the insurance company. So people like knowing that they still have that money, they can still access it. And the other thing with these GLIBs is they're not required to take it every year. So for example, if something changes in their life or their financial picture, and say they start taking this 9360, and I don't know, they take it for 5 years and I don't know, hit the lottery or something, they don't have to keep taking it. They can just stop taking it, and they can restart it if they want. Okay, so they're much more flexible than annuitizations are and things like that, even though they produce slightly less income than does an annuitization as a general rule.
John,
Now, here's an important. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, John.
No.
What's the point behind stopping GLIB income? Wouldn't you make more money in the long run anyway? If you live almost to the let's say 20 years.
Oh yeah, you could. I'm just simply saying they have the option to. You rarely see it happen. Okay, but let's say I'm taking this 9360 out of this account, and I don't know, I hit the lottery or I inherit a bunch of money. Okay, all right. I have the option. So you know what? I'm not going to take it anymore. Because then, you know, the account value just continues to grow based upon indexed interest, and it's going to be passed to somebody someday. So the point simply is if they can. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, but it probably wouldn't be smart because, I mean, there's 90% of the time you can make more money just letting it run if you outlive the income account value, right?
Yeah, you absolutely could, but it just depends on what the client's trying to achieve. That's all.
Right.
Okay. If you know, if they hit the lottery and they just don't really need that anymore, they could stop it. You just don't see it happen very much, okay? Because most people need the money, okay? Right. Here's the other thing to remember: almost without exception, if we're using qualified money here for a GLIB, okay, it will always be more than what the required distributions would be on that. So the other thing that a GLIB does is it actually gets them more money than the required distributions would off of like IRA accounts, but it also stops the need to even calculate those RMDs every year on the account you're taking this money from, because it's always going to be more. Okay, there's very few exceptions to that. Okay, that's another sales concept that we use. We have time today, I'll show it to you. Now, here's an important concept when we're talking about these GLIBs, and I like to bring this up because most agents undersell the value of GLIBs. And that is because when we trigger that GLIB, the amount of the income relative to either the premium or the account value is higher than the income factor that's used for that income. So it's a time in our example that we triggered this GLIB. Our account value is $144,651, right? And our withdrawal is $93.60. Okay, that $93.60 relative to that account value it's 6.47% of that income of account value. The factor that we used to determine it was only 4.5%, but the actual income is 6.47% of the account value at the time we commenced that income. Now, why do I bring this up? Because there's scores of agents out there when they're talking about these things, and they're telling me, hey, yeah, it'll give you 4.5% cash flow off this for life. No, it's going to give you almost 6.5% cash flow off that asset for life. See where I'm coming from? It's much more powerful than that factor. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, That's if we compare that income to the account value at the time the account, the income is commenced. Okay, and it's a very simple form. Just divide one by the other. Okay, 9.36% of the original principal. Now that's really powerful. Okay, in other words, it's many years down the road, but that 9360 is 9.36% cash flow off a $100,000 asset for life. So again, if you understand math and how to present this stuff, that's very powerful. Okay, it's really a very powerful concept if you think about it. Now there's some other different types of time value of money and yada yada calculations you can make, but the average consumer can see that. Okay, most of these things are triggered within 5 years of their issue. Okay, not the 11 years I'm showing here. And so you can say, look, you have this 100,000 in 5 years, you're guaranteed this much money, and it's going to be this percentage of your principal. What else can you do? And it's guaranteed for life. Okay, so it's a very powerful sales concept that very few agents use effectively. I've taught a lot of them to do it, but you know what I'm saying? That's powerful stuff. It really is.
Right.
Now let's talk about fees. There are exceptions, but most annuities charge an annual fee for the rider. The average is probably about 1% per year. Here's the thing we got to look at about these fees. Okay, the rider fee is typically based upon that larger income base value, guys, not the account value, but it's deducted from that account value. So we say we got a 1% annual fee for this rider. It's not 1% of the account value. There's a couple of exceptions to that product. It's 1% of that growing income base. So this is why we're fee conscious about these damn things. Okay, there are some that base it on the account value, but not many. Okay, this is why you'll see, and we have to tell clients, but you'll see this on illustrations. Your account value cannot be reduced by market action. Market loss cannot reduce your account value, but that fee you're paying for that income rider is going to be deducted from that account value every year, and that can reduce your principal. So that's why you'll see those little warnings on the illustrations and things like that, because that very much can happen, and we have to be aware of that. Now, some agents take the position that, well, the fee doesn't really matter because the income's guaranteed forever. And I agree with that on one hand, but I disagree with it on the other. Okay? Where I disagree with that is that it falls under the category of shit happens, okay? So we may be putting money into this annuity and planning, say, to take income in 5 years. So we're going to be paying this fee, right? But something can happen in life where plans have to change. So while I don't object to the fees on these things, and some are even higher than 1%, I think the average is about 0.95, okay? We have to still be cognizant of how high a fee is being charged relative to other products, because it's money the client is paying. It's coming out of their account value. And again, from this, shit can happen downwind standpoint. Had a whole discussion with this, I often do with Brian yesterday afternoon on a specific case. Do we go with product X? Do we go with product Y? Okay. And it all had to do with the fee. Now there are very few, but some annuities have free GLIB riders, okay? American Equity has one that's no fee, and it just has a smaller roll-up on it. Some products, again, the Allianz 222 does not charge a fee, but why is that? Well, because in that product, you must wait 10 years before you can start the income, and it's purely performance-based. So, these carriers, they depends on what the limitations of their product are. Most well, not most, but the majority of GLIBs, you have to wait 1 contract year before you can begin the income. But increasingly, product designs are out there. Forethought comes to mind. I'm sure American Equity can do this, Athene, where you can start them immediately. In other words, I can put my money in this product and I could start that guaranteed lifetime income stream 30 days after that contract is issued. In that case, we really don't get any roll-up growth, but we still get a guaranteed income stream off of that money. Make sense to you guys? You following me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. How do we explain this to a client? Okay. Well, depending on the sophistication of the client, there are ways we can do it. But here's the most common way it's done. It's called a T-diagram. This thing is rampant throughout the industry. Okay, the use of a T-diagram to explain a GLIB. I can tell you without exception, I invented the T-diagram for the industry. Okay, so here's how I might do it on a yellow pad. I'd say, okay, we're going to talk about this guaranteed income benefit and what we're doing here. And we need to understand, Mr. and Smith, that we're going to track two values before we start that income. There's our T. Okay, and on the left side, we're going to have your account value. That's the cash value in your account. And on this other side, we're going to track something called an income-based value. Okay, now your account value is cash. Okay, it's real money. Okay, the income-based value is just a formula. It's going to determine how much your income is going to be down the road. It's not really cash. Okay, now our growth on our account value is going to be based, in this example, is the bonus plus indexed interest, whatever that might be. Our growth on our income base is going to get that same bonus in this example, but it's also guaranteed to grow at a 10% simple rate every year until you start the income. So these are the two values we're tracking. Okay, when we're ready to come, we look at that income-based value, we multiply it by a factor how corresponds to how old you're on. That will determine how much we're going to get. Okay, once we begin taking that, it's going to come from your account value. Okay, and even if that empties the account, eventually you still get it. That's about how we typically explain these right there. Okay, called a T-diagram. That work for you guys?
That's cool.
Yeah, it does. I think another important thing to add to the GLIB, that if the owner dies before the account value is depleted, the rest goes to the beneficiary. And
I agree completely. I agree completely. Because you're absolutely right, and that you're absolutely right. Is if they die early, money goes to the beneficiaries.
Right.
Now we're going to get into the different types of guarantees that are available in the market on these things. Now, when these things fully came out, there was only one. They were fully guaranteed. And they were guaranteed really strongly. I mean, the first versions of these on FIAs guaranteed annual compounded growth. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember what the hell it was. But it was like 8% or something forever. No limit to it. Okay. So in the early days when we were first promoting these, and I was running all over the country on behalf of Forethought, teaching this shit to agents and doing their marketing materials and stuff. I'm in an airport one day, coming home from somewhere, I don't know where, and it was some people at Forethought, and they said, "Hey, listen, John, can you talk to this client and agent we've got on the phone here?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "What's the issue?" And they're saying, "Well, this guy has a client who's like 40, he's like 45 years old, I don't remember exactly, and wants to pop $1 million into one of these things, okay? And, here at the home office, whoever I was talking, we're not that adept on talking. I said, sure, patch him through. So I talked to this guy, and I said, listen, man, you're only 45. That's pretty early to put your money into an annuity. You realize you're not going to be able to pull money out before you're 59 and a half without a penalty, because it was non-qualified money. But I said, the pro on that is that this thing's going to grow as income base at 8% compounded for for 20, 30 years if you want to wait that long. I said, so, and basically what it came down to is he says, it's that growth that I want. He says, I've got another $3 million that I'm not. I said, okay, great. That's what I was worried about. Okay. So I said, good. So they used to just be fully guaranteed at very high rates, and there was no limit to how long they would grow. As interest rates started to come down, okay, and come down significantly, we started to see these guaranteed roll-up rates decrease. And we also saw them starting to put limitations on how long it would grow. Many of them are limited to 10 years, okay? And we also saw carriers putting age limits on issue. So a lot of carriers won't even issue to these people if they're not already 50 to 55. So those are other things you have to look at in products when you're doing product selection. Can I even issue it to somebody who's younger? Okay, how long is it going to grow for? So anyway, and because of declining interest rates also led to these other types, from not just having fully guaranteed, but now moving on to what we call partially or completely performance-based types. So let's take a look at these. When they're fully guaranteed, indexed interest performance doesn't matter at all, okay? You can say to the client, this income 5 years from now, 10 years from now, no matter what the market does, you can make that ironclad guaranteed statement, okay? In other words, it falls in the category of what I like to call this will happen, okay? When we have partially guaranteed, and we'll look at examples of these, okay, the indexed interest does matter, but only to a higher potential income. In other words, as we're going to see, we're going to have, you know, some of it guaranteed, some of it partially guaranteed. So in that case, I cannot make that complete statement. I could say this amount of income is fully guaranteed no matter what the market does, but in order to hit this higher amount, you know, it's going to be based upon what the market does. So as you can see what I'm saying when I say the strength of the full guarantee starts to decline. This is a combination of both what will happen and what might happen, okay? Then we have our pure performance-based ones. Everything matters. Everything is tied to indexed interest, okay? This is guaranteed, okay, but any amount, because there'll be a very small guarantee, but the higher income is based upon what the market does. This isn't the thing of mostly what might happen, okay? So it's very important when we're positioning these to clients that they not only understand what, if it's fully guaranteed or it's not, but as agents, selecting the right product and matching it to specifically the plan or the needs of the client, okay? And we'll talk about that as we get there. In other words, one type is not necessarily better than the other, although we all have our opinions on it, but it has to do with risk tolerance. In other words, if my client, given its money, has to have an ironclad guarantee, then I don't want, you know, they don't have a risk for it not becoming that much income. Other clients might have a greater risk tolerance for, you know, a range of income that can come in. So what I'd like to say on this is with any financial choice, as long as the client fully understands it and is okay with the relative risk of it, then the choice is likely suitable, okay? So let's look at some numbers on this so this all makes sense to you. So when I wrote this presentation, it was for a meeting where we were, I think Athene was the sponsor of it, so I used their product as an example. So let's look at an example of a fully guaranteed roll-up, and this is out of a, there on the right-hand side, okay, I'm sure looking at these numbers. We can see here that this is a fully guaranteed roll-up. We're issuing clearly at age 55, okay, so if they start the income at age 58, 59 here, then they're guaranteed that that income would be $4,000. They wait till age 67, then it would be $9,585. It'll be no more than that. It'll be no less than that. It will be exactly that. That amount of income relative to the premium and their age is fully guaranteed. That income is fully guaranteed. This will happen. End of story. Okay. Now, let's go to a partial guaranteed rollout. Okay. It's a different income rider they have. So now what we see here, and we're focusing on the right-hand side, is the income that they're going to get at any given age is partially guaranteed and partially based upon indexed interest. There's a range. So let's go ahead here, and let's just look at age 67, because that's really what we'd be doing here. We know that their worst case scenario would be $7,602 a year. Okay? That part is guaranteed. Now you notice that's lower than our previous 9,300 fully guaranteed, right? You guys with me?
Yeah.
Okay. But if the depending upon how the index performs over this period of time, it could go as high as $16,844 a year. Guys with me?
Yep.
Yep.
So it's partially guaranteed. This part is guaranteed. This part is performance-based. This is a combination of what will happen and might happen. To the client in this case is, you know, we know we'll get at least 7602. There's a chance that we could get as much as, you know, based upon back testing and all that, 16 grand a year. The reality is probably going to be somewhere in between the two. Okay. When we have a purely performance-based roll-up, okay, and in the case of this one, which is again an Athene product, okay, all guarantee, and most of them do. Okay, so as we see here, that small guarantee at age 66, 67 is $5,750, significantly lower than the fully guaranteed rate at $9,300, even significantly lower than the partially guaranteed worst case scenario, which is what, about a little over $7,000 bucks, right? Okay.
Mhm.
And could go as high as $9,696. Now wait a minute. Actually, this is the Allianz 222 we're looking at here. Okay. Now why 9696? Remember, if we went back up, let me show you. God damn it. Here. Sorry. Our potential on the other 16.8. You see that? Okay. So in this case, why is even the performance-based so much lower right here? Because the reason for that is because pretty much all of these purely performance-based GLIBs will keep going up over time. In other words, what they're saying here is at age 67 could be 96, 96 based upon history, but once that thing starts, it's going to go up every year based upon interest crediting. So there's all these different versions of this, okay? So if we compare these at age 67 after 11 years of roll-up, we got 9360 that will happen. We got somewhere between 7100 and 14856 that might happen, okay? Or somewhere between 5750 and 9696 plus continued increases that might happen. So these are the statements that we can make about these. On the left, we can say this is absolutely going to happen. Okay. In the middle is the income's likely to be somewhere between these two figures. Okay, depending on the product that we're using and whether or not that product income continues to increase every year once it is triggered. You guys with me on this? Does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the issue with some of this stuff, okay, is that what's happening out there is, let's look at this center one. There's a lot of agents out there who are not all that scrupulous, right? So if they've got an illustration here that shows as much as this 1485 or the 18,000, the other example we looked at, whatever it might be, what do you think they're telling the client? Look at that, look right here. 18,000 a year at age 67.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they're not explaining that as if, you know, if the index performs. Good agents, Brian's a good example of it, I'm another example. We're going to really make sure the client understands this, okay? Because, you know, the client might prefer, no, give me a guaranteed 9360. You know what I mean? And they're happy with that, or it might fit their plan just fine, okay? Because one of the reasons that we do all this income gap analysis, or at least the reason I do it, okay, is so that I can determine what that guaranteed number has to be. That tells me how much premium we need to put in the product, okay, in order to close off their foundation income gaps. That's a different story. Other clients might be perfectly fine saying, you know what, I'll take the chance, okay? I'll take the shot at a lower guarantee but a much higher potential. So let me go back to this case we were talking about yesterday, Brian and I were talking about yesterday afternoon. So in this particular case, it was an example where if we decided to go ahead and include an income rider as part of the recommendation, it was very appropriate and completely performance-based because the guy is in his early 40s, okay? So if he's got 20 years before he's going to retire, okay, there's two things that we want to be sure we do for him. First of all, if we've got 20 years, he's got enough time to where it's likely those projected performance-based numbers are likely to happen. And remember, the more time in the market, the greater likelihood it's going to happen. Okay. The other thing about that is if we were going to use an income rider product in that particular case, we were going to say, let's go ahead and use the Allianz 222. It's purely performance-based, but there was another reason we wanted to use that one if we went that route. And it was because the Allianz 222 doesn't charge a fee for the income rider. Now, you have to wait at least 10 years before you can start the income. What that income is going to be is pretty much entirely dependent upon what the market does. But in the case of a really young client, we've got that amount of time, don't we? Okay? We've got enough time to use a product with that type of a design. And because he's young, we don't want him to pay a significant fee or any fee along the way because it just doesn't make sense for that. Now, if instead I have a client who's 65 years old, he's going to retire at 67, okay, and I know by doing mathematical analysis, income gap analysis, that we need to produce an X amount of income for him. I'm going to want to use a fully guaranteed roll-up rate. So I'm getting at, I want to be able to say, yes, we will get exactly that much income and it fits into your plan, yada, yada. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So these are the decisions that as producers we're making because, first of all, the clients don't even know how this shit works. And a lot of times, okay, you'll get agents who don't give enough thought to this, okay, because most agents have one or two products they're comfortable with and they try to put that square peg in every round hole that they come up with. You know, I'm getting it? And this is where unsuited things like that. So we have to apply some knowledge about the objectives of our client, which, you know, that's a cliche to say that, okay, but it's absolutely true, and then apply the right products to them. And sometimes within a single product, you'll have these different choices. Within the same product, you can elect an option that says, I'll have a fully guaranteed income roll-up, or instead, no, I'll take the option for the partial one. Now, in most of these annuity contracts, you have to make that selection at the time you buy the product, which I don't particularly like, okay? You have to make that selection whether you want that income benefit ultimately to be based on just your life or your life and your spouse's life, okay, at the time of contract issue. That's not too bad if we're gonna trigger this benefit right away or within just 2 or 3 years. It's not too bad. But if we know we're going to wait 5 or 10 years before we trigger it, having to make that choice now, you know, it can be a little bit difficult. So we're starting to see designs come out where they can make that choice not in advance, but at the time they're going to start the income. That's the key thing of the new Annexus Elevate product, okay? It's on a theme paper. And what I like about that product is it has both guaranteed and partially guaranteed roll-up options, both single life and you know, joint life, increasing income or not, and the client makes the decision of which they want at the time they're going to start the income. So I think that that's a huge advance in that particular product. So you guys tracking with me here?
Yeah, we're still with you.
Yep, got it.
Okay, we're almost done, but there's a couple of things I want to cover. And by the way, Vitaly, where this really makes a big difference, as we're going to see next week, is when we're running illustrations. Because when we run the illustrations, we have to make that decision of what we're going to illustrate right at that time. Okay, and I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute, but I want to get into something else first. So going back to this thing, one type is not necessarily better than the other. It depends upon the situation of the client, their risk tolerance, and all of that. Now here's the question that often comes up. How do we handle inflation? The Achilles heel of these fully guaranteed income benefits is that once they begin, they're never going to go up, okay? And so we're not typically going to keep up with inflation on that income stream, okay? So that's why these other types of designs came out that said, well, we'll give you, each year we'll increase that income by the same amount of interest you earn. But in order to do that, they've got to do some things, okay? So income benefits, some of them will provide increasing income, and they market the crap out of that. Look, increasing income, increasing income. And that could be a set percentage, but most commonly it's based upon indexed interest performance. But you have to understand that this is a trade-off. In other words, if I'm not going to increase that income every year, regardless of how I'm doing it, once the income stream begins, then I'm going to give you a higher starting amount. We saw examples of that, right? $9,300 or whatever it was, guaranteed for life, but it's never going to go up. If instead, as the carrier, I want to design an income rider that's going to increase once it begins, based upon index performance or inflation or whatever, then I am going to provide a lower starting amount of income. And we saw examples of that in the stuff that we just looked at, okay? There's no option in this. Here's why, okay? From a mortality and actuarial perspective, the carrier needs to be able to provide the same total income over time for the same amount of premium. So if I've only got $100,000, then, and I'm looking out, paying this out for 10, 15, maybe 20 years or more, but they're typically just looking at mortality, then I can say, well, I can pay you $9,300 per year or whatever it is, but I've never increased it. But if I have to increase it, I have to take that same total actuarial payout that I want to make and start it out lower in order to increase it over time. Does that make sense? Do you guys follow what I'm talking about?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So this is why we see those lower starting amounts. So it's simply a trade-off that you're making, okay? It's simply a trade-off. Now, to move away from annuities for a moment, this is precisely what happens with Social Security. So Lori, when Social Security looks at your or my Social Security benefit, okay, and they say, well, if you take it at age 62, we'll give you $1,500 a month for life. If you wait till 67, we'll give you $2,000 a month for life. But if you're willing to wait till age 70, okay, then we'll give you $2,600 for life. From the standpoint of Social Security, they don't give a rat's ass which one you pick. Actuarially, they're going to pay you the same amount of money over the however many years you're expected to live. Okay?
Right.
That's exactly what's going on with these annuities. And so from a finance standpoint, you have to understand this. In other words, the number one rule of finance is that nothing is free. There is no free lunch. So yeah, I can increase your income over time, but I'm going to start out lower. Or I can give you higher now and never bring it up, but there's nothing free. Just again, like we talked about premium bonuses yesterday. I can give you a 10% premium bonus. I'm going to lower your crediting rates. Okay, nothing is free. Okay, that doesn't mean any of it's bad. It's all a question of what's most important to the consumer and what fits into their plan best. Okay, so now I talk about this inflation being the Achilles heel of fully guaranteed benefits that never go up. So how do we handle inflation? Well, this has a lot to do with what type of producer you are, because there's essentially three ways to handle inflation depending on the situation with the client. We can use a lower beginning income amount in a GLIB and accomplish inflation by the annual increase that happens in that GLIB. We can get more creative, depends how much money the client has in the situation. We can use some kind of laddering, okay? So for example, I can take some money, put it in a GLIB and start it this year. Then I'm going to take a different pot, I'm going to let it roll up for 5 years, and then I'm going to start it. So the total income stream goes up when I start it. And I can do that 3, 4, or 5, however many times I want to do it. If they have enough money, you can make it work in the plan. That's just simply what we call laddering. What agents and producers such as myself have a tendency to do, and this is my preferred way, is we use the risk assets to cover inflation. So I'll give them a level, I'll take that guaranteed level income benefit that I absolutely know is going to happen, okay, fully guaranteed. I know it's never going to increase, and I'm going to manage their securities, their risk assets in the market to try to get enough growth on those so that the withdrawals that I'm making out of those risk assets when they're retired are high enough to give an inflation increase on the total amount of income that they're getting. So what's best, it depends on the case and the client and the plan that you're putting together. So that's how inflation is largely covered. Any questions on that, Mr. Vitale?
No, sir, I understand.
Okay. So that's the end of the dog and pony show on GLIBs. The last thing that I want to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, hang on, I'm going to run a very quick illustration, and let me bring up the illustration software here. Hang on, it's going to take me a moment. And so that you can see this sort of play out in real life, and I particularly want Lori to see this as well. So I'm going to use the choice income from Forethought. Why did I choose that? It's got a very simple illustration. It's at my fingertips. Okay, not necessarily the best product, although I do like this product a lot. Now the choice income has a 10% simple roll-up on its GLIB pretty much forever, as I recall. Okay, so that's one of the things I like about it. So, as our state, I'm going to go to a fixed indexed annuity, and I'm going to choose choice income. Thank you. All right, so I believe it is non-qualified. I'm going to assume I have a 60-year-old, and I'll go ahead and put a spousal beneficiary on it who is 55. I'll go here, and I'll fund the thing with 100 grand. I'll leave it alone. Now, when we're looking at a fully guaranteed income benefit like we are here, I don't give a rat's ass what strategy I pick. I don't care, okay? Now, down here, I'm saying, when do you want to start this income payment? Is it going to be a single life or joint life? So let's say my guy's going to retire at age 67. So I'll pick, I want it in year 7, and I'll start off by looking at single life. Now, different illustration systems work differently, but I can go to quick view here in the system, and it's simply going to show me what that benefit's going to be. Indeed, $7,280, okay? And so now I know what that benefit's going to be. I can also look over here real quick, see what the death benefit would be. And what that death benefit is telling me is that if we start this income benefit at age 67 on a fully guaranteed basis, okay, which really assumes no crediting, zero crediting, we could run out of money right around you know, age 77, but the income continues. You notice this column never stops, even though this account value column gets really down. Now, what I want you to notice is what I did here was I used a single life. Now I'm going to go back to funding and withdrawals, and I'm going to use joint life. You also notice up here I took option 1. That's the level 10% simple. Okay. So if I now go to the quick view on this, we're going to see instead of income drop, it's now only 5,760 instead of 7,006 what it was. Why? Because now it's based on a 55-year-old and joint. And so anytime we go with a joint income benefit, that amount of income is going to be decreased. We're going to use a lower income benefit factor, and it's going to correspond to the youngest person. So that's the other thing we have to look at when we're doing these things, is do we want to use joint life or single life? Now, when we think about this, actually, remind me, I'll go back to joint versus single in a moment because I want to show you something else. Now, on a single life benefit, we've now got a guaranteed 5760. Now I'm going to take option 2. This is partially guaranteed, okay? And I think Quick View will show us the difference. So with the partially guaranteed, our guaranteed amount is only 5480. It dropped even more. To see what the actual potential is I got to go in here and do the full illustration. Just take a second. Okay. Let's go, guys.
Pretty neat.
Now, this is option 2, which means the roll-up is only 7.5, okay, and the rest of it. So looking at this, I got to get down here. Here's what we see, okay. Age 66, 67, okay, I got 5480, okay. And the reason we're seeing that is this is with guaranteed elements. With me? So, since guaranteed, my only guarantee is that lower 5,480 for life, okay? And we can actually look at a fully guaranteed basis. Look at this contract value. Guaranteed means there's no interest crediting happening, okay? So we see we'd be out of money by around age 80, okay? Now we go down here and look at this one with non-guaranteed. Now what non-guaranteed means is that we're assuming some kind of back testing in what, you know, the index would have done, okay? And so now look over here on the right-hand side, okay? My fully guaranteed, okay, my potential has now gone to 5820 a year, okay? So it's gone up a bit based upon some performance because they're back testing some you know, what the index might do. And you notice as a result of that, the contractor cash value also lasts longer, okay? And so that's, so anytime we have a performance base, it's typically going to show what the guarantee is going to be, okay? And it also will show, you know, these things all show different versions of back testing. That's something I'm going to get into with next week, Vitaly, is how to decipher these damn things when you're looking at these. They have to show 3 or 4 different scenarios, okay? So anyhow, there's a real quick example of looking real world on a real world illustration of the difference between partially guaranteed and fully guaranteed. We see that, you know, the guarantee goes down, but the potential gets higher, all right? So anyhow, that's the Dog and Pony Show. Any questions?
No questions here.
Okay, well now you know how guaranteed lifetime income benefits work. So like I said, I'll get this thing posted, this recording, to the YouTube thing, and I'm sure by the end of the day I'll have all the YouTube thing carried out. I'll send links on how to get in there so you can see all 3 sessions that we've done. And then next week, Vitaly, obviously we'll start looking at illustrations. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording.